Maria's departure the next morning was quieter than usual. She avoided meeting my eyes as she gathered her things, her movements stiff and subdued. For a moment, I thought she might say something, but she said nothing. The front door closed with a soft click, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than ever. I sat on the couch, staring at the coffee table where her empty wineglass still rested. What hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that everything I thought I knew about Maria, about us, might have been a lie. I didn't notice the cracks right away. At first, it was subtle. Maria started coming home late from work more often, claiming her job was more demanding than ever. She'd drop vague reasons about deadlines and demanding clients, brushing off my concern with a quick kiss and a tired smile. I believed her. After all, I had no reason not to. I chalked it up to her busy schedule. Maria worked as a real estate agent, a career at which she excelled, but it kept her on the go constantly. Late showings, weekend open houses, last-minute client calls, it came with the territory. I didn't mind. I was proud of her success. I opened my laptop and navigated to the camera feed again. The live view showed the empty living room, the same space where so much had been revealed. But this time, I wasn't looking at the present. I scrolled back through the archived footage, going days, weeks, even months into the past on the days I go on business. The process was grueling. Hour after hour of mundane, uneventful recordings played before my eyes. Maria came home alone, tossing her bag on the table, and scrolling through her phone on the couch. At first, it all seemed so normal, so routine, but then, I began to notice the patterns. At first, I didn't question it. Her job could be unpredictable, but then she used her phone more and more. The footage showed him entering the house with the same casual confidence I had seen the night before. Maria would greet him with laughter and warmth. They'd sit on the couch, their conversations quiet but their body language unmistakable. The way she leaned into him, the way he touched her arm, it was all too familiar, too intimate. I paused the video, my heart pounding. The timeline in my mind was growing clearer, but it only made the betrayal cut deeper. This wasn't a one-time mistake or a fleeting lapse in judgment. This was deliberate, repeated. I needed to know more. Maria's phone had always been her most guarded possession. She carried it everywhere, kept it close, and angled it away whenever I was nearby. I'd tried to unlock it before, but her new passcode made it impossible. Then, I remembered her laptop. It was sitting on the dining table, left behind in her rush to leave this morning. My stomach churned as I powered it on, the screen glowing to life. I half expected a password prompt, but to my surprise, the home screen appeared without any barriers. Her email account was already open. For a moment, I hesitated, my conscience warring with my need for answers. Was this another line I was about to cross? But then I thought of the nights I had spent questioning myself, doubting my instincts, while Maria carried on with her lies. Whatever guilt I felt paled in comparison to the truth I needed to uncover. The inbox was neatly organized, full of work-related emails and client correspondence. At first glance, it seemed harmless, almost mundane, but as I scrolled further, my eyes caught on a folder labeled personal. My heart raced as I clicked on it. The first few emails were innocent enough, chats with family members, reminders about birthdays, and online shopping receipts. But then, I saw a name, Mark. She smiled, leaned in for a kiss, and walked away as if her explanation was perfectly reasonable. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Great seeing you last night. Let's plan something for the weekend. Miss you already. I clicked on one, and the words on the screen felt like a punch to the gut. Thanks for last night, Mark. You always know how to make me laugh when I need it most. The longest, she replied with a sigh, heading toward the bedroom. Can't wait to see you again this weekend. I'll figure out an excuse to stay in the city. Same place as last time? My chest tightened as I scrolled through message after message, each one more damning than the last. The casual intimacy, the ease with which they communicated, it was clear that this wasn't new. The final blow came in the form of an attachment. It was a photo of the two of them, sitting together at a dimly lit bar. His arm was draped over her shoulders, her head tilted toward him as she laughed at something off camera. Her smile was radiant, her eyes bright with happiness. I closed the laptop, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. My chest heaved as I struggled to process what I had just uncovered. She had shared parts of herself with the man that she had taken away from me. The weight of it all felt crushing. I had spent so long blaming myself, wondering if I had done something wrong, if I had failed to meet her needs. But now, I saw the truth for what it was. This wasn't about me. This was about her choices, her selfishness, her betrayal. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the blank screen of the laptop. The room around me felt suffocating, the walls closing in as my mind raced. What was I supposed to do with this information? Should I confront her, give the evidence in her face, and demand answers? Or should I stay silent and wait? Part of me wanted to yell, to scream, to do something just to release the rage and heartbreak coursing through me, but another part of me felt eerily calm. Instead, I grabbed my phone and began scrolling through my contacts. I paused at a familiar name, Greg. Greg had been my best friend since college, someone who had been there for me through every high and low. If there was anyone who could help me make sense of this chaos, it was him. I hesitated. What would I even say? Hey, Greg, guess what? My wife's been cheating on me with a guy named Mark. The thought of vocalizing it made my stomach churn. No, this wasn't something I could share with anyone, not yet. Next, I tried her email. I knew her password, she'd been using the same one since college, but when I typed it in, the login screen flashed red. Incorrect password. I couldn't help but wonder, was this my fault? Had I been so focused on work, on maintaining the image of a perfect marriage, that I had missed the cracks forming beneath the surface? Had I failed to notice her unhappiness, her discontent? I turned back to the laptop. The emails I had seen were damning, but they might not be the full story. What else had Maria hidden? Opening her laptop again, I navigated to her photo library. The screen was filled with rows of thumbnails, most of them innocuous pictures of work events, family gatherings, and trips we had taken together. But as I scrolled further, I noticed a folder labeled work trips. Something about it made my pulse quicken. Maria rarely took photos during her work trips, claiming she was too busy to stop and document anything. Yet here was an entire folder dedicated to them. The camera felt heavier in my hands than it should have, as though it carried the weight of the decision I was about to make. This was my home, my marriage, my sanctuary. Yet, here I was, preparing to monitor the very woman I had promised to trust and cherish. The first few were pictures of Maria at fancy restaurants, her wineglass raised in a toast. At first, they seemed harmless, just a professional unwinding after a long day. But then, Mark appeared. In one photo, he was seated beside her, his hand resting casually on the back of her chair. In another, they were smiling at the camera, their faces close enough to suggest more than just a working relationship. As I clicked through the images, my breath grew shallow. These weren't just casual snapshots, they were intimate and personal, the kind of photos you'd take with someone you cared about deeply. Once the camera was positioned, I checked the feed on my laptop. The angle was perfect. I adjusted the photo slightly, making sure nothing looked out of place, then stepped back and took a deep breath. It was done. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of my phone buzzing on the coffee table. It was Maria, her name lighting up the screen like a cruel joke. For a moment, I considered answering, but what would I say? That I knew everything? That I had seen the emails, the photos, the footage? My hands clenched as I let the call go to voicemail. The phone buzzed again, this time. A text message. Hey, babe, are you okay? How was work today? I stared at the words, my anger boiling over. How could she act like everything was normal? Like she hadn't completely shattered the foundation of our life together? I wanted to reply, to confront her, to demand answers, but I stopped myself. This wasn't the time for an emotional outburst. If I was going to confront her, I needed to be prepared. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I couldn't focus on anything, my mind replaying the events of the last 24 hours on a loop. Every laugh, every touch, every shared moment between Maria and Mark felt like a scratch in my heart. By the time evening rolled around, I knew I couldn't sit in silence any longer. I needed to take action. Grabbing a notepad, I began jotting down everything I had discovered, the footage, the emails, the photos. I documented every date, every detail, every piece of evidence that confirmed Maria's betrayal. This wasn't just for my own sanity, it was for the inevitable legal battle ahead. The divorce papers had been the first step, but I needed to ensure that Maria couldn't manipulate the situation in her favor. As I worked, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. For the first time in weeks, I had a plan, a way to take control of a situation that had left me feeling powerless. Later that night, I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen. The house felt empty, hollow, as if the warmth that had once filled it had been sucked away. Maria still hadn't come home. Part of me wondered if she was with Mark, laughing and sharing moments that used to belong to us. The thought made my chest tighten, but I pushed it aside. I couldn't afford to dwell on what I couldn't control. Instead, I reached for the remote and turned on the TV. The footage I had queued up the night before was still there, waiting to be played. I hesitated for a moment before pressing play, watching as Maria and Mark appeared on the screen once again. This time, I didn't feel the same gut-wrenching pain I had felt before. Instead, I felt resolute. This was the reality I needed to face, and I was ready to do whatever it took to move forward. The evidence was all there, the emails, the photos, the calendar entries. Every piece told the story of her betrayal in stark, undeniable detail. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to force her to look at the truth she'd tried so hard to hide, but another part of me held back, knowing that timing was everything. I needed to control the conversation, to ensure that when the confrontation came, she had no way out. The next morning, Maria left for work early, her cheerful demeanor masking the cracks in our relationship. "Have a great day," she said brightly as she kissed me on the cheek. I watched her go, the door clicking shut behind her. For a long moment, I stood there in the silence, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I couldn't keep living like this. I spent the rest of the day preparing for what was to come. I compiled the evidence into a single file, labeling each piece with dates and context. The emails, the photos, the footage, all of it was there, neatly organized and impossible to refute. As I worked, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't consumed by doubt or confusion. I knew what I needed to do, and I was ready to face it head on. When Maria came home that evening, I was waiting for her. "Hey," she said, her voice hesitant as she stepped into the living room. I didn't respond immediately, my gaze fixed on the laptop in front of me. "Evan," she said, her tone cautious. I looked up, meeting her eyes. "We need to talk." Maria stood frozen in the doorway. Her cheerful expression faltered the moment our eyes met. She must have sensed something was different, my tone, my posture, or perhaps the sheer weight of the silence that filled the room. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. The decision to wait wasn't easy. Every fiber of my being screamed for action. I wanted to call Maria, to demand answers, to yell and cry and ask her why. Why would she betray me like this? Why would she risk everything we had built for some fleeting moments with a stranger? Her eyes darted to the laptop on the coffee table, and for a brief moment, I saw panic flash across her face. "Evan," she began, her tone soft, almost pleading, "if this is about..." "Sit down," I repeated, cutting her off. Reluctantly, she lowered herself onto the couch, her movements slow and deliberate. I stayed standing, the physical distance between us feeling both necessary and symbolic. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. I forced a smile, my heart pounding in my chest. "Of course," I said, keeping my tone steady. She walked over and kissed me on the cheek, her lips soft but cold. "The retreat was great," she said, slipping off her shoes. "Exhausting, but productive. I got so much done." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I saw her swallow hard. Maria began unpacking her bag, pulling out neatly folded clothes and a small bottle of wine. "I brought this back for us," she said, holding it up with a smile. "Thought we could share it tonight." "That sounds nice," I said, though my stomach churned at the thought of sitting across from her, pretending everything was fine. Later that evening, Maria curled up on the couch with her glass of wine, scrolling through her phone as I pretended to watch TV. My fingers itched to grab the remote, to turn on the video I had prepared, but I needed the timing to be right. I pressing the power button on the remote, the screen flickered to life, and for a moment, it displayed the usual evening news. Then, the footage began to play. "What is that?" she asked, her voice sharp. On the screen, she appeared. Maria walked into the living room with the tall, dark-haired man. Her laughter was light and carefree, the kind of laughter she hadn't shared with me in months. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the screen. My heart raced as I reached for the remote, my fingers tightening around it. Maria leapt off the couch, reaching for the remote, but I moved faster. "No," I said, my tone firm. "You wanted to smile your way through this? Then watch what you've done to our marriage." I didn't answer immediately. my fingers tightening around the edges of my laptop. The words I wanted to say were caught in my throat, tangled with anger, sadness, and the crushing weight of betrayal. I can explain, Maria stammered, tears welling in her eyes. Maria poked her head back into the living room, a faint frown creasing her brow. You sure? You seem off. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks as she shook her head. It wasn't, she began, but I cut her off. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't stop. I saw the footage. Maria, I read the emails. I saw the photos. Don't you dare stand there and tell me you can explain this? She spoke as if she missed me, as if the distance between us was purely circumstantial and not something she had deliberately created. You know, I said, keeping my tone light, I've been thinking about how much time we've both been spending apart lately. Maria returned a few minutes later, 2 mugs of tea in hand. She set one down in front of me, then curled up on the couch with her own. So, she said, her tone light, what's new with you? Anything exciting happened today? I took a sip of the tea, the bitterness matching the emotions swirling inside me. Not much, I said, my voice carefully neutral, just thinking about a few things. Not serious? I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. You call sneaking around, lying to me, and sharing a life with another man not serious? Are you even listening to yourself? I said, my voice cold. Don't you dare use that word with me. Love doesn't look like this, Maria. Love doesn't lie, doesn't betray, doesn't destroy everything in its path. For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of her sobs and the faint hum of the TV. The footage had ended, the screen now displaying the menu where I had queued it up. Maria sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she choked out, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry, Evan. Sorry? I said, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. You're sorry now? Were you sorry when you brought him into our home? Were you sorry when you kissed him, when you laughed with him like you haven't laughed with me in years? For a while, we sat in silence, the tension in the room thick and palpable. Maria scrolled through her phone, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the screen. She seemed oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, studying the small movements that had once seemed so familiar, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the slight curve of her smile as she read a text. These were things I had loved about her, the little details that made her feel at home. But now, they felt like reminders of everything I had lost. Maria, I said suddenly, breaking the silence. She looked up, startled by the sharpness of my tone. Yeah? I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing. I wanted to ask her about the man, about the emails, about the photos, but instead, I said, do you ever feel like we've been distant lately? Her brow furrowed, and she set her phone down. What do you mean? I don't know, I said, shrugging. It just feels like we haven't been as close as we used to be. Maria's expression softened, and she reached out to take my hand. Evan, I know I've been busy with work lately, but that doesn't mean I don't care about us. You're the most important thing in my life. The words made me ache, their sincerity tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. That night, as Maria slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her words replayed in my mind, mingling with the images of her and Mark together. The contrast between the woman she pretended to be and the woman she truly was left me feeling hollow. I turned onto my side, watching as she slept. Her face was peaceful, her breathing steady. It was hard to reconcile this version of Maria with the one I had seen in the photos, laughing and leaning into another man. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, a longing for the version of her I had fallen in love with. But that version was gone, if she had ever truly existed at all.